Hello everyone, it's Ocean Unknown and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to begin a new tradition on this channel, which is a review of all my favorite reads of the year. I will still make videos about certain books and series, but I wanted to make a video discussing the books that I want to discuss, especially when I have a little less or a lot less than an entire dedicated video to say about it. Including plays, since I am a theater major in college, and that calls for reading a lot of plays. I read 42 books and plays this year, which I do recognize is a lot. But a lot of that number comes from books and plays I read for school assignments. Also, I will try my best to avoid spoilers for all of these books and plays, but still proceed with caution. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. The first book I finished this year, I actually made an entire video about, and that is All's Well by Mona Awad. For those who didn't watch my video about All's Well or are unfamiliar with the book, here's a brief summary. After a tragic fall that ended her acting career, Miranda Fitch struggles to live her life dealing with chronic pain, invalidation from her colleagues and doctors, isolation in her love life, and her mutinous theater students who wish to put on the Scottish play instead of the play she has chosen, All's Well That Ends Well. Enter three businessmen who give Miranda the promise of a possible return to the life she used to live before the accident, and Miranda is taken on a wild fever dream of a journey of romance and control, a horror comedy novel with a touch of Awad's signature magical realism. All's Well explores society's collective refusal to acknowledge and believe female pain, as well as the trials and tribulations of an artist obsessed with their former glory, because all the world's a stage, and in the businessman's deal, all is well. If you couldn't tell by my video about All's Well and my costume design breakdown of Bonnie, I am a big fan of Mona Awad and the way that she blends fantasy with very topical issues. She also has such a grasp on the world of her books. In the case of All's Well, it's the world of theater and especially theater in college. As a theater major in college, I absolutely loved this book and found myself laughing at so many of the references to Shakespeare and college theater. I don't think you have to be well versed in theater to enjoy this book, because I went into this knowing nothing about All's Well That Ends Well, and I was able to understand the connection between Miranda's story and the play, but I would recommend reading a basic plot summary of the Scottish play if you haven't read it before reading All's Well. The characters are so engaging and flawed, the plot takes such wild turns, and the climax of this book is probably the closest I will ever get to an acid trip. I have a lot more to say about Mona Awad later in this video, so I rate All's Well 10. I'm not quite sure what that was. Out of 10, you're all going to hell. Goodbye. The next book I finished this year was a book that was on my FYP for like 2 months straight, so I caved in and read it, and that is Zombabe by I.S. Bell. Or, as I like to describe it, Pet Sematary but for gay people. Zombabe is a queer horror YA novel that follows Eugene and Henry, childhood best friends who exclusively call each other Dude and Babe. After Babe is accidentally killed from an allergic reaction, Dude, who has a secret crush on Babe, brings him back from the dead. However, Babe now has an insatiable hunger for human flesh. With their found family of best friends, Babe and Dude have to work through their feelings for each other, the unknown supernatural horrors of their small town of Bouldine, Maine, and what the future holds for them after graduating high school. I think this book does a lot of things very well. The world building of this small town that is on the edge of becoming a ghost town, but also has this incredibly dark and haunting history of violence and hatred. The attention to detail put into Bouldine as a town also adds so much detail to the characters' motivations as to why they all want to leave the town, because they all deserve so much more, and they know it. Dude and Babe so effortlessly care about each other, and their love story just feels so satisfying. Like, Dude loves Babe so much it's like breathing to him, and Babe is just such a funny and interesting focal character. Jules and Anna also make a great supporting cast. Belle also doesn't skimp out on the horror and gore. Those scenes are quite spread out, but the payoff is definitely worth it. Overall, I just really enjoyed this book, although I will say I wish I either read it in October for Halloween or in June for Pride Month. A solid 8, you're gay, out of 10, you're You're gay. Now, oddly enough, the next book I read is about zombies that I read with my book club, and that is Warm Bodies by Isaac Marion. They made this story into a movie about 10 years ago or so some of you may know the plot, but here's a brief synopsis. We follow R, a zombie who has lost his memories of his human life as he craves, pun intended, to be able to communicate the thoughts in his head. In this book, when the zombies eat brains, they're able to see the memories of that person, so when he kills Perry and eats his brains, he starts to fall in love with his girlfriend, Julie. Now severely attached to Julie, R takes care of her while trying to further understand these newfound feelings he's developed. I watched the movie many years ago, and then recently watched it again with my book club after finishing the book. And I will say the book is a lot more serious than the movie. The movie clearly wanted to be a YA romantic comedy, and while there are some funny parts of the book is more of a YA romance with small horror and drama elements. R's inner monologue in this book is probably my favorite part of this book, and he's so fleshed out as a character, pun intended. And I truly understand his anxiety with wanting to share his feelings and feeling like he can't. As a theater major in college, I absolutely loved that this book is a retelling of Romeo and Juliet and all the little references and details. Overall, I was very surprised by how much I liked this book. A solid 9 out of 10. Sam! Now, I was in my 6th semester of college for the first 5 months of this year, so the next few books and plays I read were specifically for school. I took a comics book and graphic novels English class as an elective, which meant that I read a lot of comic books. Notably, I read a lot of X-Men comics for my essays in that class, and I wrote my final paper about Nerfstar, Marvel's first gay superhero, and I cried while reading the comic where he gets married, which is the first same-sex marriage ever featured in a comic book. I also took a theater history class that went from ancient Greece to the Restoration period. I will be discussing 2 of the plays I read, but the other 14 plays I read in this class, for anybody curious, were Agamemnon, Oedipus Rex, The Bacchae, The Little Clay Cart, Everyman, The Second Shepherd's Play, Atsumori, Twelfth Night, Snow in Midsummer, Puente Ove Juna, Life is a Dream, The Rover, The Frogs, and Antigone. The first play I wanted to discuss from my theater history class is The Tragical History of the Life and Death of Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. This play is where a lot of very common tropes come from, most notably the concept of making a deal with the devil. The story follows Dr. Faustus, a scholar who has become bored in his studies and devotes himself to magic. He summons a demon and makes a deal with the demon that he will serve him for 24 years, and Lucifer will claim his body, mind, and soul. I did really enjoy this play, as it is very much up my alley. I do think I'm probably going to have to read it again at some point because I don't remember a lot about it. But overall, 7 out of 10. The other play I wanted to talk about from my theater history class is Tartuffe by Molière. Oddly enough, my school produced Tartuffe this year, but that is not the reason I want to talk about this play. Tartuffe is a French Renaissance play about a religious hypocrite who manipulates a wealthy and influential family into giving him what he wants, their estate and their daughter's hand in marriage. I have a soft spot for certain classical plays, and Tartuffe is definitely one of them. This play is very fun while also having very serious topics, and it can really be set in any time period or place and still be relevant and have different meanings. My college set it in a 2017 Schitt's Creek style mockumentary, whereas I just finished up an unrealized concept for the show that has it set in an overly fake, uncanny valley 1950s suburbia setting that may or may not be completely inspired by Will Wood. But Tartuffe does have a small special place in my theater-loving heart. Around the time I graduate, I do want to make a video about some of the theater costume designs and concepts that I've come up with, so stay tuned for that. Overall, Tartuffe gets an 8 out of 10. Now we're moving on to my summer reading, which started with a book I've been meaning to read for a long time, and that is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. I watched the movie before reading the book, and honestly, I'm kind of glad I did that because of my complete shock at the differences between the book and the film, especially with how Snow is characterized. For those who are unfamiliar with this book is a prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy taking place 64 years before the first book. The story centers around President Snow when he was 18 and his trials and tribulations with both the social politics of the capital 10 years after the first rebellion, and as he becomes a mentor in the 10th annual Hunger Games. As he deals with conflicted feelings towards his tribute, Lucy Gray Baird from District 12, he faces a lot of questions regarding his morality and what is really the most important thing to him. Because as he says 64 years later,
"It's the things we love most that destroy us."
This book is a masterclass in world building, character building, and socio-political commentary for young adult audiences. Koryo is such a conflicted protagonist because with the background knowledge that he becomes the unremorseful, calculated, vicious villain that is President Snow, we see how much he too was indoctrinated and how deep the capital propaganda goes, even in the early days of the games, but also how there were so many occasions where Snow could have become a good person but refused. I want to make a video about him so bad, along with so many parts of this book. I was working on one, but then of course the day I finished the book, Suzanne Collins announced that there's going to be another book in the franchise, so I'm going to wait for the new book to see if there's anything that adds to the topic of this unreleased video. All the characters were so compelling and complex, the plot worked so well for Snow's backstory and to give further lore to the Hunger Games, and I'm very intrigued to see how this gets built up upon even further in Sunrise on the Reaping. 10 out of 10.
This cage is delightful.
You all will probably not be surprised by my next read, which was Rouge by Mona Awad. Telling the story of Belle, a woman who is obsessed with skincare and is grieving the death of her strikingly beautiful mother, is met with a series of strange events and people coming into her life that lead her to La Maison des Méduses, an extravagant spa that is directly tied to both her mother and dark secrets of Belle's past. As with the other Mona Awad books I have read, the character building is great, the establishing of setting and detail put into the people behind the spa is so in-depth and paints this picture for the readers. All of the characters are incredibly flawed and complex. The themes of generational trauma, mother-daughter relationships, racism, beauty standards, and how trauma affects all of our relationships are explored so deeply in this book. The references to fairy tales, the skincare and beauty industry, pop culture in the late 80s, early 90s, and Egyptian mythology are so clever and fit this book so perfectly. My only critiques would be some characters are introduced and seem really big but never really go anywhere, especially with the goth twins and the very doll-like girl that follows Belle for one chapter. Also, I wish there was a better closure for Hud Hudson, the detective and main love interest for Belle. However, I thoroughly enjoyed this book, 8.5 out of 10. Last but certainly not least for my summer reads is Their Vicious Games by Joelle Wellington. I jokingly refer to this book as The Bachelor's craziest season, but this book is so much more than that. We follow Adina Walker, a young black girl at the prestigious Edgewater Academy who has lost her scholarship to Yale due to an altercation with the school's bully. The founding family of Edgewater, the Remingtons, host the Finish every year, a competition between Edgewater's most tenacious women of that year, and the Remingtons will grant any opportunity for the winning contestant. However, the competition turns out to be life or death, as this year, the women are also fighting to be the youngest Remington's bride. Ready or Not meets Squid Game under an old money academia setting that packs a massive punch to criticize the broken systems in society. I genuinely couldn't put this book down. I finished it in 4 days, which is the quickest I have ever finished a novel. The characters in this book are so compelling and some of them are so strange. The Remingtons make very clear and messed up villains even when they try to help Adina. Esme is a cutthroat antagonist that adds a lot of drama. Hawthorne is genuinely one of my favorite characters from any book I've read this year. Penthesilea's character shift towards the end is so satisfying. Saint is a great deuteragonist, and while she is still rich and has connections like everyone else, she's so unique and stands out amongst this cast of characters as a sly yet kind new money candidate. And Adina is a wonderful protagonist who brings a lot of humor and honesty to this book. The themes of breaking traditions, exposing corruption, racism and elitism, and resilience really stand out, as this book is horrifying in one scene, completely nerve-wracking in another, and then really funny in the next, with each theme being highlighted throughout the book. The character descriptions along with their outfits are so vivid and really helped create this old money, closed off atmosphere. I literally forgot about the Simon Says scene until I was writing all this down, and oh my god. Overall, I loved this book. 9 out of 10. As I got back to school for my 7th college semester, I read a few more plays, including Fortinbras by Lee Blessing and 6 Years Old by Daphne Silbringer. But the main play I want to talk about is the one that I costume designed for as my capstone. POTUS, or Behind Every Great Dumbass Are 7 Women Trying to Keep Him Alive by Selena Fillinger. This play centers around 7 women in the White House struggling with a PR disaster after the president makes some questionable choices. Of course, because this was my capstone, this play will forever have a special place in my heart. Not only that, it's also so funny. It was also very special for me to costume design this show as my capstone because 2 of the characters in this play are lesbian lovers, and as a lesbian myself, it was just really special to me. I absolutely adore this play. 10 out of 10. During my second to last college semester, I took a lot of English classes both as electives and because I'm getting a certificate in LGBTQ+ studies. I took 2 classes for my certificate in which I read This Body I Wore by Diana Ghosh, Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, Ruby Fruit Jungle by Rita Mae Brown, and Detransition Baby by Tori Peters, which were all lovely. The class I really want to talk about in this video is the monster literature class I took. There's 3 books I'm going to discuss in this video, but the other books I read for this class were The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, and Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. The first book I want to discuss is an absolute classic, Bram Stoker's Dracula. You would think with my massive love of vampires and scary stuff that I would have already read Dracula. Well, it took me this long. I did very much enjoy it. Genuinely, my favorite part was the 3 women vampires in the castle because I'm gay. A solid 7 out of 10. Right after reading Dracula, my class followed up with a more modern vampire novel, and that was Woman Eating by Claire Kohda. This book follows Lydia, a biracial vampire that is starting out her independent life in London away from her mother. Her mother turned Lydia into a vampire when she was a baby, but taught Lydia to never succumb to her vampiric desires because they are evil. Lydia studies art in London and forms an unlikely connection with a young artist named Ben, all while struggling with fitting into the human world, mental health issues, and her relationship with food. I absolutely love this book. It covers so much ground of womanhood and special topics that I found incredibly touching and relatable, all while also being a wonderful vampire novel. The relationship between Lydia and her mother is so complicated yet enticing. The discussions surrounding self-hatred and shame and mental illness and how that factors into human connection are so real and raw. Also, the descriptions of food in this book is so in-depth. Overall, this book is so incredibly written. The story and characters are so complex and entertaining, and it hits so many topics and themes so beautifully. 9 out of 10. Last from the monster literature class books is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Following Noemi, a young socialite in 1950s Mexico City, her cousin begs her for help as she is under the suspicion that her husband, Virgil Doyle, is trying to kill her for her money. Noemi is sent to the Doyle Manor, where she finds out the true horrors of this absurd family. If you like Knives Out or Ready or Not, or even the aforementioned Their Vicious Games, you will definitely enjoy Mexican Gothic. It is such a fever dream, and the twists and turns are so interesting. 8.5 out of 10. The final book I will be discussing is another classic, which is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I was the dramaturg for a production of Young Frankenstein back in November, so I thought it would be best if I read the original novel that inspired the 1931 film, that inspired the 1974 film, that inspired the 2007 musical. For my research, I definitely found reading the book useful, and I did really enjoy it. Of course, I learned the hard way that the bride isn't a character in the novel, but overall, it was a good read. 8 out of 10. And those were all of my reads from this year. If you liked this video, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to join the Sea Bunnies, and turn on the bell for notifications. Comment down below your thoughts or what was your favorite book you read in 2024, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you so much!